looking ahead, is network and identity convergence, is that coming? So do you see these in like a security model context? What might this look like in 2 to 3 years? And I know we've got things like ZTNA and network aware or identity aware proxy, things of that nature, but this feels like this is different. This is heading a little bit beyond that. So, John, I want to start with you on this topic of convergence.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in general, if you look at a lot of the industry reports on things like ransomware, right, like how to defend against it, you always see sort of a security technology stack that's recommended, right? So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, starting from, let's say, identity, what you need to do there, like SSO, MFA, and then application workload protection, all the way down to the network layer. So in the network layer, egress security control, microsegmentation, encryption, all these things have to work together, let's say, to prevent a ransomware attack. There's already kind of a convergence in terms of recommendation of what to do at each layer. Going forward, what I foresee is these different layers integrating and talking to each other. So for example, if you detect something at the application layer, that tool or agent might tell the network layer to take certain action. So for example, if there's a compromised workload, let's say even through in a couple of years, some sort of AI agent in this environment might notice that and reconfigure the network layer to say, okay, let's quarantine this workload, right, into a private subnet and kind of cut it off from the rest of the environment. Or the agent might say, let's monitor this workload because we're not too sure if it's actually compromised. So let's collect some extra logs and send that to, let's say, our detection response tools. I see definitely more integration and more visibility between these different layers, and actions can be taken at the various layers based on the current.
Faizan, I'd like your perspective here too. What do you see as maybe thinking about what John said in this potential converged future? What are some of the challenges and opportunities from an IT and an operational perspective that you would get from this kind of converged network identity world?
The fact of the matter is that if you look at the industry today, most of the IT security practitioners, they usually inherit a network that was built before they joined, right? So they inherit a network. And the network was built not necessarily to counter the modern day threats, especially with AI coming in, the challenges have increased. And the notion of the perimeter as we used to know it in the sometime days, right? We used to have a campus LAN, and there was this false perception that if you have a firewall, it will safeguard everything, and that's all what you need. But when people started moving to the cloud, and when your work started to move into different directions, today we are living in a world where application in different VPCs or VNets can be connected to any other data sources, or you might have API calls coming in from an LLM in one cloud to the data sources in the other cloud. You might have inference workloads at the edge as well. So it's a very complex mesh. In order to protect this kind of environment, you need to rethink your strategy, and instead of security, think of security as a bolt-on. We must start to think him as a built-in feature, and that's why I feel that this is not a trend. This convergence of network and identity is not a trend. It's a necessity. That's the only way you can safeguard your data and your intellectual property, because yes, we all know that perimeter may not be the same as it used to be in the early days, but still the concepts of computer science and physics, are still the same, right? Data packets are still the same. They still need to be routed to a destination. So as long as you are able to create this symbiotic relationship between identity and network, so think of a world where let's say your AI agent needs to run a diagnostic on a VPC, and it first needs to check out a permission that will allow it to run that operation on a VPC. It's not something which is going to be given to a non-human identity, as we call it. We need to treat non-human identities as similar to humans, right? It has to be subjected to the same level of rigor. So once that agent is able to check out the permission required to run a diagnostic, then it communicates, as John was saying, to the other layer, which allows the route to be open and send the traffic to the destination. So we have to rethink our strategy in this modern world. And sometimes I believe that there is this sunk cost policy where IT practitioners sometimes feel that since we have invested so much in that architecture, we don't want to move. But that's something which is really critical, that unless and until you're willing to rethink your overall architecture in the light of different threats coming in, you won't be able to survive this onslaught of bad actor breaches coming in, and bad actors unfortunately are pretty smart in identifying the weakest link in your infrastructure, and they are very quick to exploit it. So it's up to the practitioners to understand the sensitivities and make sure that from the identity perspective, there is only just-in-time privileges, and that too ephemeral. As I said earlier, we have to go away from trust but verify to never trust, always verify, and that's something which can severely reduce the blast radius of any attack.